The rain battered the windshield of the old pickup truck as it roared down a desolate Oregon highway, the world outside a blur of gray and green. Ezra Caldwell, barely 18, clutched a crumpled letter in his trembling hands, the words, "You're no son of mine," burning into his soul. Cast out by his family in Texas for being gay, he was now a stranger in a state he'd never known, abandoned with nothing but a backpack and a heart full of fear. Ezra's breath hitched as he stared out at the endless stretch of road. Portland was still hours away, and the driver, a grizzled trucker named Hank who'd taken pity on him at a gas station, hadn't asked questions. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thump of wipers and the occasional crackle of the radio. Ezra's mind raced. Where would he go? How would he survive? The weight of rejection clung to him like damp clothes, cold and unrelenting. Hank glanced over, his weathered face softening. "Kid, you got anyone out here?" His voice was gruff but kind, the first hint of warmth Ezra had felt in days. "No," Ezra whispered, his voice barely audible. "Just me." His dark brown eyes, still red from crying, flicked to the letter again. His parents hadn't even given him a chance to explain. They'd packed his bag, driven him to the bus station, and told him to leave Texas for good. The memory stung. His mother's averted gaze, his father's clenched jaw, the door slamming shut behind him. Hank grunted, scratching his beard. "Portland's got a heart, you know. People there, they'll take you in if you let them." He didn't push further, and Ezra was grateful. The trucker dropped him off at a small diner on the edge of the city as dawn broke, the neon sign flickering Maggie's Place in the mist. Ezra stepped out, his sneakers sinking into the wet gravel, and watched the truck disappear. He was alone now, truly alone, in a city that felt like another planet. Inside the diner, the smell of coffee and bacon grease wrapped around him like a blanket. Ezra slid into a booth, his backpack tucked tightly against his side. The waitress, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a name tag reading Maggie, set a mug of coffee in front of him without being asked. "You look like you need this," she said, her voice warm but not prying. Ezra nodded, unable to find words. He sipped the coffee, its bitterness grounding him, and watched the early morning crowd. Construction workers, a couple of students, a man in a suit reading a newspaper. That's when he saw him, Lucas Rivera, mid-20s, with curly blonde hair and a quiet intensity, sitting at the counter. Lucas was sketching on a napkin, his brow furrowed in concentration, a half-eaten plate of pancakes beside him. Something about him, maybe the way his fingers moved with purpose or the soft curve of his smile when he glanced up, made Ezra's chest tighten. He hadn't expected to feel anything but fear today, yet here was a spark, faint but undeniable. Ezra didn't approach him. He couldn't. Not when his life was a wreck, not when he was still reeling from being disowned. But Maggie noticed his gaze. "That's Lucas," she said, leaning over to refill his coffee. "Artist, good kid. Comes in every morning to sketch and think." She paused, studying Ezra. "You need a place to crash, don't you?" Ezra froze, his face flushing. Was it that obvious? I don't have much money," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Maggie waved a hand. "We got a spare room upstairs. It's not much, but it's warm and dry. Help out around here, and we'll call it even." Her offer was so simple, so matter-of-fact, that Ezra felt tears prick his eyes. He nodded, swallowing hard. That night, in a small room above the diner, Ezra lay on a creaky cot, staring at the ceiling. The sounds of Portland drifted through the window. Car horns, distant laughter, the hum of life. He thought of Lucas, the stranger who'd caught his eye, and wondered if this city could ever feel like home. For the first time in days, hope flickered, fragile but real. Over the next few weeks, Ezra settled into a rhythm at Maggie's place. He washed dishes, bussed tables, and learned to make coffee that didn't taste like tar. Maggie became a surrogate mother of sorts, her tough love balanced by quiet gestures. A plate of leftovers pushed his way, a blanket left on his cot. The diner was a hub for misfits, and Ezra began to feel like he belonged. Lucas was a regular, always at the counter with his sketchpad. Ezra stole glances when he could, memorizing the way Lucas's curls fell over his forehead, the way his laugh lit up the room. One morning, as Ezra refilled his coffee, Lucas looked up and smiled. "You're new here, right? I'm Lucas." Ezra's heart stuttered. "Ezra," he managed, his voice cracking. "Yeah, just passing through." Lucas raised an eyebrow, his green eyes sharp but kind. "You don't look like you're passing through. You look like you're starting over." The words hit harder than Ezra expected. He ducked his head, busying himself with the coffee pot. "Something like that," he mumbled. Lucas didn't push, but he started talking to Ezra more each day. Small things at first, like the weather or a funny customer, then deeper conversations about art, dreams, and the way Portland's rain made everything feel alive. Ezra learned that Lucas was a muralist, painting vibrant scenes on city walls, and that he'd grown up in a small town in California, leaving behind a family who didn't understand his need to create. One rainy afternoon, Lucas invited Ezra to see one of his murals, a sprawling depiction of a forest at dusk, painted on the side of a community center. They stood under an umbrella, the world soft and quiet around them. "This is what I love," Lucas said, his voice low, "taking something ordinary and making it more." Ezra stared at the mural, then at Lucas, and felt something shift inside him. "You make things beautiful," he said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Lucas turned, his gaze locking with Ezra's. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Lucas smiled, soft and real. "You see beauty too, don't you?" That night, back at the diner, Ezra couldn't sleep. Lucas's words echoed in his mind, mingling with the ache of his past. He was falling for someone, and it terrified him. What if love led to more pain? What if he wasn't ready to trust again? But Lucas was patient. Over the next few months, their connection grew. Quiet moments at the diner, walks through Portland's parks, late-night talks about everything and nothing. Ezra shared pieces of his story, the rejection, the fear, and Lucas listened, never judging. "You're not defined by what they did to you," Lucas told him one night, his hand brushing Ezra's. "You get to write your own story now." Ezra wanted to believe him, but deep down, he wondered if he could ever outrun the shadow of his past. By spring, Ezra and Lucas were inseparable. They spent weekends exploring Portland's quirky corners, food carts, bookstores, hidden art galleries tucked in alleyways. Lucas taught Ezra to see the city through an artist's eyes, pointing out the way sunlight danced on the Willamette River, or how graffiti told stories of rebellion and hope. Ezra, in turn, opened up about his love for music, sharing old songs from his childhood that still made his heart ache. Their first kiss happened on a rooftop overlooking the city, the skyline glittering under a rare, clear sky. Lucas had brought Ezra to see a mural he was working on, a vibrant swirl of colors depicting people of all kinds holding hands. "This is us," Lucas said, pointing to two figures in the center, one with dark hair, the other blonde. Ezra's breath caught, and when Lucas leaned in, their lips met in a rush of warmth and certainty. For the first time, Ezra felt like he belonged not just to a place but to someone. But love, even the kind that feels like salvation, doesn't erase old wounds. Ezra still carried the weight of his family's rejection, and it surfaced in quiet moments. When Lucas mentioned his own family's strained but improving relationship, or when Ezra saw couples with their parents at the diner, he wondered if he'd ever be whole enough to give Lucas the love he deserved. One evening, As they sat in a park watching the sunset, Lucas took Ezra's hand. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice gentle. "What's going on?" Ezra hesitated, then spoke, his voice raw. "What if I'm not enough? What if what they said about me is true?" He didn't need to explain who they were. Lucas's grip tightened. "Ezra, they were wrong. You're more than enough. You're everything." He paused, his eyes searching Ezra's. "I love you." The words hit like a tidal wave. Ezra froze, his heart pounding. He wanted to say it back, but fear choked him. Instead, he kissed Lucas, pouring everything he couldn't say into the moment. Lucas didn't push, but Ezra knew he'd heard the silence. As their relationship deepened, Ezra found work at a local music shop, repairing guitars and teaching kids to play. The job gave him purpose, a way to rebuild himself note by note. Lucas cheered him on, attending every open mic night where Ezra nervously played covers of old folk songs. But the closer they grew, the more Ezra felt the pull of his past. He hadn't told Lucas everything. How his father had called him an abomination. How his mother had prayed for his soul as she pushed him out the door. Those memories were a wound he couldn't touch. One night, after a long shift at the diner, Ezra found a letter tucked into his backpack. The handwriting was his mother's, the postmark from Texas. His hands shook as he opened it, expecting another rejection. Instead, it was an apology, halting, awkward, but real. She wrote about missing him, about questioning the choices she'd made, about hoping he was safe. There was no mention of his father, and the absence spoke volumes. Ezra didn't tell Lucas about the letter. He couldn't. Not yet. Instead, he threw himself into their life together, helping Lucas with murals, planning late-night adventures. But the letter gnawed at him, a reminder that love could be fragile, that even those who claimed to love you could turn away. Months turned into a year, and Lucas began talking about the future, moving in together, maybe even marriage. Ezra wanted it more than anything, but the idea of a wedding brought back memories of his family's rejection. Could he stand at an altar, knowing they wouldn't be there? Would Lucas's family, who'd warmed to their son's life, accept him? Doubt crept in, and with it, distance. One evening, Lucas confronted him. They were in their favorite coffee shop, the air thick with the scent of espresso. "Ezra, you're pulling away," Lucas said, his voice steady but laced with hurt. "I need to know why." Ezra's throat tightened. He wanted to explain. The letter, the fear, the weight of being abandoned, but the words wouldn't come. "I just need time," he said finally, hating how weak it sounded. Lucas nodded, but his eyes were sad. "I'll wait," he said, "but don't shut me out forever." That night, Ezra lay awake, the letter from his mother burning a hole in his drawer. He knew he had to face his past if he wanted a future with Lucas. But how do you forgive the people who broke you? And how do you love someone when you're still learning to love yourself? The turning point came in the fall, when Lucas landed a commission to paint a mural for a community festival. He asked Ezra to help, and together they transformed a blank wall into a vibrant scene of Portland's bridges, each one symbolizing connection and resilience. Working side by side, Ezra felt the distance between them shrink. Lucas's laughter, his steady presence, reminded Ezra why he'd fallen in love. One afternoon, as they cleaned paintbrushes under a crisp autumn sky, Lucas brought up marriage again. "I want to build a life with you," he said, his voice soft but sure. "Not tomorrow, not next year, but someday. You in?" Ezra's heart raced. He wanted to say yes, but the fear was still there, a shadow he couldn't shake. "I want that too," he said finally, "but I need to deal with some things first." Lucas nodded, his hand finding Ezra's. "I'm here, whatever you need." That night, Ezra wrote back to his mother. It was a short letter, raw and honest, pouring out the pain of her rejection but also his hope for reconciliation. He didn't expect a response, but sending it felt like reclaiming a piece of himself. When he told Lucas about it, the relief in Lucas's eyes was palpable. "I'm proud of you," Lucas said, pulling him close. That took guts. Months later, a response came, not from his mother, but from his older sister, Lila. She was in Seattle now, living her own life, and she wanted to see him. The letter was warm, apologetic, and full of questions about his new life. Ezra cried as he read it, a mix of joy and grief. He invited Lila to visit, and when she arrived, a tall woman in her 30s with the same dark eyes as Ezra, they hugged for what felt like forever. Lila's visit was a turning point. She met Lucas, saw the murals, and listened as Ezra told her about his life in Portland. "I should have stood up for you," she said one night, her voice breaking. "I was scared, and I failed you. But I'm here now." Ezra forgave her, not because it was easy, but because he wanted to move forward. Lila's presence gave him courage, and when Lucas proposed a few weeks later, on the same rooftop where they'd first kissed, Ezra said yes. The ring was simple, a silver band with a single blue stone, but it felt like a promise of forever. Planning the wedding brought new challenges. Lucas's family, while supportive, lived far away, and Ezra's family was a question mark. He hadn't heard from his mother since her letter, and his father remained a silent void. Ezra threw himself into the details, choosing flowers, picking a venue in a forest clearing outside Portland, but the absence of his parents weighed heavily. As the wedding approached, Ezra and Lucas faced a new hurdle. A local group opposed to their marriage. Flyers appeared around the neighborhood, calling their love unnatural and urging the community to boycott the event. The hate stung, reminding Ezra of the rejection he'd fled. Lucas, ever the optimist, brushed it off, but Ezra saw the worry in his eyes. One night, someone spray-painted a slur on Lucas's latest mural. The sight of it, ugly red letters defacing their work, broke something in Ezra. He wanted to give up, to run again, but Lucas wouldn't let him. "We're stronger than this," Lucas said, grabbing paint cans. Together, they covered the slur with a new image, two hands clasped, surrounded by stars. The act was defiance, love, and healing all at once. The community rallied around them. Maggie organized a fundraiser at the diner to help with wedding costs, and strangers showed up with donations, flowers, and words of support. Ezra realized Portland wasn't just a place. It was a family he'd built, piece by piece. But as the wedding day loomed, Ezra couldn't shake the fear that his past would cast a shadow over their future. Would his parents show up? Would they reject him again? And what would happen when the world saw their love laid bare? The wedding was set for a crisp October afternoon in a forest clearing just outside Portland. The venue was simple but breathtaking. Tall pines framed a wooden arch draped in wildflowers, and fairy lights twinkled as the sun began to set. Ezra and Lucas had chosen this place for its quiet beauty, a reflection of the life they wanted to build, rooted, real, and full of love. Ezra stood in a small cabin nearby, adjusting his tie in a cracked mirror. He was 20 now, his dark hair neatly trimmed, his flannel shirt replaced by a tailored suit. Lila was there, helping him with his cufflinks, her presence a steady anchor. "You look happy," she said, her smile soft. "Mom would be proud, you know?" Ezra's chest tightened. He hadn't heard from his mother since her letter, and his father's silence was deafening. "I don't know if she'd come," he admitted. "I invited her, but—" Lila squeezed his shoulder. "You're enough, Ezra, with or without them." Outside, guests began to arrive. Maggie, Hank, co-workers from the music shop, and Lucas's parents, who'd flown in from California. The air buzzed with laughter and music, a local band playing soft folk tunes. But Ezra's nerves were frayed. The hate group had grown louder, their flyers now threatening protests. He worried they'd ruin the day, that their venom would taint the moment he'd dreamed of with Lucas. Lucas, meanwhile, was in another cabin, his blonde curls tamed for once, his suit a soft gray that made his green eyes shine. He was nervous too, but for different reasons. He wanted this day to be perfect for Ezra, to show him that love could triumph over pain. He'd spent weeks planning a surprise, one he hoped would heal the wounds Ezra carried. As the ceremony began, Ezra walked down the aisle, his heart pounding. Lucas stood at the arch, his smile brighter than the sunset. The officiant, a friend from the community center, began speaking about love's power to bridge divides. Ezra barely heard the words, his focus on Lucas, on the way their hands fit together, on the promise they were making. But then, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Ezra turned to see a small group at the edge of the clearing, holding signs with hateful slogans. His stomach dropped. This was his fear come to life, the world intruding, telling him his love was wrong. Lucas squeezed his hand, grounding him. "Focus on me," he whispered. "Just me." The officiant raised her voice, her words defiant. "Love is not a mistake. It is not a sin. It is the courage to be who you are, to choose who you stand with." The crowd cheered, drowning out the protesters. Maggie stood, her arms crossed, staring them down until they retreated, their signs drooping in the fading light. Ezra's eyes filled with tears, not of fear but of gratitude. This was his family now, these people, this place, this man. The vows came next, and Ezra spoke from the heart, his voice steady despite the emotion. "Lucas, you showed me I could be whole again. I promised to love you, to fight for you, to choose you every day." Lucas's vows were just as raw. "Ezra, you're my home. No matter what the world throws at us, I'll be by your side, painting our story together." They exchanged rings, and as they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. But the moment was interrupted by a new arrival. Ezra's mother stood at the edge of the clearing, her face pale, her eyes wide with emotion. Beside her was Lila, who'd slipped away to meet her. Ezra froze, his heart caught between hope and fear. His mother approached, her steps hesitant. "Ezra," she said, her voice trembling, "I am so sorry. I was wrong. Can you ever forgive me?" Ezra's throat closed. He looked at Lucas, who nodded, his eyes full of love. "Mom," Ezra said, his voice breaking, "I want you in my life. But this is my life now." She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and pulled him into a hug. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The crowd watched in silence, the moment heavy with meaning. The reception was a blur of joy, music, dancing, and laughter under the stars. Maggie had outdone herself, turning the clearing into a wonderland of lanterns and homemade food. Lucas's surprise was revealed. A mural painted on a canvas backdrop depicting their journey, from Ezra's arrival in Portland to their rooftop kiss, each moment captured in vibrant color. "This is our story," Lucas said, his arm around Ezra. "And it's just beginning." Ezra's mother stayed, sitting quietly with Lila, watching her son dance with his husband. She didn't speak much, but her presence was enough for now. Ezra knew reconciliation would take time, but the fact that she'd come, that she'd seen him marry the man he loved, was a victory. As the night wound down, Ezra and Lucas slipped away to a quiet corner of the clearing. They stood under the pines, their hands intertwined, the world soft and still around them. "I was so scared," Ezra admitted, his voice low. "I thought I'd lose you, or that my past would ruin this." Lucas smiled, brushing a thumb across Ezra's cheek. "Your past didn't ruin us. It made you who you are. And I love who you are." Ezra leaned into him, the weight of the day settling into something warm and solid. "I love you too," he said, the words finally free. "Thank you for waiting." They kissed, the forest whispering around them, and for the first time, Ezra felt truly free, not just from his past, but to embrace his future. The road to this moment had been long, marked by pain and loss, but it had led him here, to a love that was stronger than rejection, stronger than hate. Years later, Ezra would tell their story to anyone who'd listen. Not just the pain of being abandoned, but the beauty of being found. He and Lucas would build a life together, painting murals, playing music, and creating a home filled with love. They'd face challenges, prejudice, doubt, the slow work of healing family ties, but they'd face them together. The wedding had changed everything, not because it erased the past, but because it showed Ezra that love could rewrite it. In that forest clearing, surrounded by people who chose him, Ezra learned that family isn't just where you come from. It's who you choose to stand with, who chooses to stand with you. And as the stars shone above, Ezra knew he'd never be abandoned again.